and it is held every meter. It's 6 meters long, which is the standard length, and it is held with every meter with another welded steel structure which goes into the ground on a concrete base to keep it absolutely stable. Otherwise it twists. If you don't do that, it sort of... And you copy it from here? Right. Where? Many places here. In the beginning, you see the steel, but after a few years, it just melts into the ground, blends into the ground.
Did you find any archaeological remains?
We did, yes. Besides the literature search, we did, because we dug all over the place to put the water and to repair the walls and to repair the foundations. So there was digging everywhere. It was called Verdun at some stage. And we found no trace of former line of planting or anything. We did photographs by helicopter at different times after the rain and all that to try and see something. And we did spot the traces of the orchard which was there in the 1850. We saw exactly where the apple trees were, but no trace of what was there in 1660. And we went to a very great extent because, for example, there was a camp which was very famous in the French army, which was the Camp de Vaucieux, which was organized during the War of Independence of the United States of America in order to frighten the English nation that we might disembark and that they wouldn't send too many troops to the American war. And we had 35,000 men, and we found all the archives, and they maneuvered in the flat plain under Brécy. And we found who was lodged in Brécy. It was the Maréchal Duc de Coigny, who was commander of the cavalry. And we had 35,000 men there for 2 years, and the fleet in Caen. And this man stayed in Brécy for a number of days, and he wrote that he was in a house with a beautiful garden, but he never bothered to describe the garden or to make a sketch, which is really what I was hoping for. Le Camp de Vaucieux was very famous later because it is there that the French army developed all the basic maneuvering techniques which Napoleon used.
Does the help that you got from the Direction régionale d'affaires culturelles and the Ministère de la Culture
It was limited to...
force you to open the hub?
No, it was open before. Under the Lacrotel, it was open every day of the week. And it was very difficult for the poor man who was living there, because the garden under the Lacrotel was kept through by one couple, the lady who was showing the garden for the visit and keeping it, and one man who was gardening on his own. And he had no direction, he was just keeping the garden as well as he could. And he did that between 1980 and 1992 for 12 years, really without supervision, because the Lacrotel had bought another castle called Le Château d'Eau in Normandy, single O, which is a beautiful Renaissance castle, and they were not concerned with Brécy anymore. And therefore, this lady was opening every day on instructions of Madame de Lacrotel. There were not many visitors, but it was open all the time. So when we came, we on the contrary, we reduced the opening to give a bit more flexibility, and we are now open Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday to the public, and every time by appointment.
At 3,500 visitors, or whatever it is it worthwhile?
No, it's costing.
I would have thought
It is costing because the organization to keep it open, to sell the tickets, everything. It is maybe breaking even or slightly costing. But it is. I would never close it because I think it would be absolutely ugly, and also it is useful under French tax law because as long as the garden is open to the public, I don't get grants for the gardeners and the gardening spending, but I can deduct all that spending from my general income, and therefore at the moment I pay very little tax. I manage to spend most of my general income.
Because you need a very large number of visitors, like you were told. What are the many
Yes, yes. But I don't think
all your expenses.
I don't think Brécy could possibly contain more than 10,000 visitors a year. Because if we have more than 50 visitors in that garden, it starts looking crowded. Because it's also one of the main problems of the design. You see every part of the garden from wherever you are. Because the garden is on a slope, and you see everything from any point nearly. And the first comments of most of the garden designers who come and give advice is, why don't you separate it a bit more and have some discovery effect, and not see everything at the same time as you come in. But there I would have trouble with the architect en chef des monuments historiques, because he wants it to stay more or less as it is. I mean, adding fountains, that was all right, but putting a proper separation between the terraces and reducing the view and changing it so far would make him uneasy.
You might find another one who will agree.
I would hate asking again. It's such a painful process that you do it only once.
I don't think it would be right to partition it too much, because it's more like an amphitheater. What would be better to go to the other parts, tie them more in by, get
Yes. No, but you.
different roads.
Yes,
Rather than
what you could still do is keep absolutely the central view and keep the amphitheater effect in the middle, but you might introduce a bit more separation on the sides. We have various projects, but I don't think I would get permission. Yes. Oh, we had all sorts of simulation. We even had a very famous garden designer who came and who said the symmetry is utterly boring, and you should plant blue on the left and yellow on the right.
Was there any historic evidence for that?
No.
I think you would have had trouble with the architect.
Yes. Oh, yes. Certainly so.
So, what are the main plans for the future? Because I think
The plans for the future is really to consolidate the windbreaks and the hedges, and to plant woods around, to organize the landscape around it a lot, to make sure that everything grows properly, including on top of the hill with the wind, and to keep everything healthy, which is not that easy, because the beach especially is fragile under these conditions.
Do you find that what you've done has attracted attention, interest, and support from the local people?
From the local people, very much so. I forgot to say that we had an ugly, on top of that hill, we had an ugly electrical line. And the local community was willing to help me funding the removal of that line. And we buried 600 meters of electricity line, which went underground. The pylons, everything disappeared. And the local community helped. I had to pay for about 40%, but the state obviously did its part, and the local community went in. They are quite happy that it is coming back into shape. It is obviously being more and more visited. Maybe we should open on Saturdays also. I think because we have a lot of people who come on Saturday and who are not happy to get in. If they come by appointment, they will get in. But just people driving by.
Does it bring some business to the village?
No, not at all. not at all. There is no village. The great advantage of Brécy is that it was a village. And this is really the luck that Brécy had. Under French law, when you have a village, you must have a mairie, a school, everything, and then you end up with property development and the pavilions, and the village grows. Brécy merged with Saint-Gabriel in 1900. At that time, Brécy had about 20 families living there. When Brécy merged with Saint-Gabriel, Saint-Gabriel was bigger, and the mairie, l'école, everything is in Saint-Gabriel. Saint-Gabriel has all the development and is 3 miles from us, and all the modern housing and all that. And Brécy went down from 20 people to 5 people. So Brécy is now a hamlet, which is completely quiet and beautiful. And the village is 3 miles to the east. But if Brécy had remained an independent village, it would have grown, and it would have created necessarily trouble in the views. Because the great advantage is that all the views are perfect. You never see anything, and you see very far sometimes.
You mentioned David Hicks' garden in this country. You say the English gardens have influenced you, even though the style is so very...
No, I took that specific idea from David Hicks' garden because I loved it when I saw it. But otherwise, there could not be much influence, because really what we did was to follow the architecture which was there, and to try to keep the plantation as simple and as sober as possible. The only one plant I forgot, because they all say that I shouldn't plant it, and around as a windbreak, and sometimes just around the walls of the garden, I planted a lot of Quercus ilex. And everybody said that in Normandy they wouldn't fare, and I knew they would thrive, because you can see them in Omaha Beach Cemetery, the big American cemetery, where they have beautiful ones in a very windy condition. Please?
I wanted to ask you about that, because that's the Fountain Terrace. You're using some rather good small leaf ones. Who is advising you? Because I think there are changing climates over here. Most alternatives to box have used either polluter and anticancer.
This is on the last terrace. This is not on the Fountain Terrace. On the very top terrace, where you have the balustrade that you see from the house, and the balustrade was against a last wall, and we wanted to have a complete tapestry of evergreen plants, so that the balustrade, which is gray, would show against the background of evergreen plants. And what you see there on the top terrace is a list. There are many more, in fact, of some of the evergreens which have been planted along the wall, because instead of planting everything with one sort of evergreen, we went for a tapestry effect with I think it's 15 different evergreens.
So I think what's important about your list is to point out that if you're making a tapestry hedge of ilex, is to use these rather good small leaf ones, because they're easy to clip, they don't have the vertical
Yes.
changes.
The cornuta is all right. The crenata is not very good. The crenata, initially I wanted to have a sort of collection of ilex, and the crenata does not do great effect, does not achieve a lot of... the crenata is the small leaf Japanese ilex, and it doesn't create a mass as I would like. Yeah. The plant I discovered, which I didn't know at all, was Rhamnus alaterne, which is a very good evergreen, pale green, and grows very well in that climate. It does very well on chalk, and I've been completely happy with Rhamnus alaterne. It was advised to me by someone 2 years ago, and it's been growing tremendously well. And it's very seldom used. Rhamnus alaternus, ou alaterna. Qu'est-ce que tu dis, Benesh? Alaterna? Rhamnus alaterne. It's a very beautiful green, like young beech, like the leaf of young beech, and evergreen. And it grows about 3 meters high. And it's very dense.
Well, I don't know how we missed your garden when we got the last
Well,
Normandy.
the last thing is, it is not disclosed at all, but as I'm here, when you enter the courtyard on the left, if I'm there, you are most welcome to a library which is big and specialized on garden history, garden design, garden architecture. About 5,000 books.
Wow. I think we'll score the most time. It's not disclosed yet. Thank you very much.
We already got quite a number of people on our list, and I was asked to explain again where the boat is leaving. Now, the boat is leaving at Westminster
That's one side.
here, which is off Embankment Tube Station. But make sure you're there at 9:30 the latest, because the boat is open for everybody to join. It's public transport, so it's something maybe nice, and it's June. So there may be a lot of eager people going also down to Greenwich. But it should be all described in the leaflet attached to the program. There's also possibility of taking the train. And also you can come by car and park it right in front of the building actually. But we do need your names. And we do need your names the latest tomorrow lunchtime. So the list will circulate around again. Because without that you won't have access to the premises. Tomorrow morning. Okay.
No, yes. Coffee available at 9 o'clock, and we start the lecture in the village at 9:30. So, sharp. We look forward to seeing more men. Four, I think, particularly looking forward. Certainly, any of us who have seen the Didier lately will be thrilled to hear what, how it was intended, the history of it, and what new transformation brings to us to be beneficial.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to talk about the Tuileries. Le lever. And I'm going to talk about the history of the place because it explained the way we worked, Pascal Cribier, François Roubaud and myself, on the project. And you will see that my pictures sadly are not as colorful and as nice as the last one we had yesterday. Ah, ça c'est là. So that's an aerial view of the place before we started, or even before the Louvre started to be rebuilt. And I just found it, and sadly I don't have the result and the same picture today, but that explain you the geographical situation of the place with the river, with the Seine on the left, which is the south of the garden, and with all the Louvre building, with at the base of the picture La Colonnade de Perrault, and the 17th century part of the place. And most of the, and also what is important is to see the rather angular connection between the buildings and the garden itself, and what the garden has been generating, being prolongated by the Champs-Élysées, going to La Défense now, after the Arc de Triomphe was added. So that garden has been terribly important on a urban point of view. As I was saying, it's bordered on its south side by the river and by a major traffic place, which is the Rue de Rivoli on its north side. That is totally different from how it was conceived, because the gardens and the houses were going to the garden, the convents and the hôtel particulier from la Rue Saint-Honoré. And but this garden has been generating the city as it is now. This plan is one of the Androuet du Cerceau plans, and it shows the place with the river south underneath and the north at the top of the picture. It's a mid-16th century plan, which is the way Catherine de Médicis has been wishing and building our garden, the Louvre being on your right, and what is now the Champs-Élysées on your left. You see that the garden is totally walled, and that it's a regular patterned plan with all the alleys of the same size, but built with the main axis in front of this new palace of the Tuileries built by Philibert Delorme and Bulan. I'm not adding anything about that situation. The garden has been evolving later on in a rather simple way. In fact, it didn't evolve much, apart from the fact that this plan is the Vassilien plan, showing just on the right of the manège, there on the left of the picture, the mulberry walk, which was planted by Henri IV, and this is the Henri IV state. And you see that the Louvre, which is at the far end of the picture, behind Les Fossés de Charles V, was connected to the building built by Catherine de Médicis, by the Galerie du Bord de l'Eau, on the right-hand side, explaining how the Louvre has been evolving. And I'm just jumping onto the Le Nôtre plan, which seems to you to be the other way around, but I want to keep the West on our left. And it is difficult to explain what Le Nôtre has been doing on that plan, but if you have the other one in memory, actually he has been pushing the garden, or maybe I should reverse actually, on this éperon, which was called La Garenne de Monsieur Renard. And so he has been pushing the garden west, keeping this idea of an enclosed garden, but transforming the walls of the garden into terraces. There is La Terrasse des Feuillants, which is the smaller one in the north of the picture, and a bigger one, which is La Terrasse du Bord de l'Eau on the south side, dominating the river, but excluding the view from the garden to the river, apart when you were climbing on it. So the garden has been extended to the west, but the main thing is that he opened a gate, a view in these walls. What we don't see on that plan is that there were some ditches on the west side, and that it was not a door to the garden. As in most of the way of, the Le Nôtre's work, the first part of the garden, the house being on the right-hand side, was a sort of huge flat space with parterre de broderie. because which were dominated from the living rooms of the palace, which were in the first floor. And the very funny thing, it's the only Le Nôtre garden where this idea of overlooking from a higher point of view different places is existing, because there is also the garden is ending by 2 parterres too, which were dominated by the terraces. This first space of the parterre is the first optical work Le Nôtre did. And I'm going to try to shout. But what is interesting in that plan is that, first of all, the space after the pool is much bigger. And the second thing is that from the angle view of the palace, the pools were red on the same side. So what Le Nôtre did was to enlarge his axis. The garden is not symmetrical, but balanced. And he added this octagonal tool too. And the very tidy part of the parterre was followed by less tidy bosses in the number of 16. And all that was placed on the countryside. The view and the axis being written, but it was on the countryside. And so it was going from the most sophisticated to the less sophisticated. And then the history of the following century of the garden was not important in its design, apart from the fact that the parterres were transformed into grass, no more box, and that in Louis XV's time, some sculptures of Marly came back to the Tuileries. And as you can see in the Le Nôtre plan, very few statues were there, just 4 of them at the back of the first big round pool, the first rondeau. This is the view which was seen from the house with the parterre. And so I'm jumping from what I was saying, Louis XV, with the few sculptures from Marly, to late 18th century. During the 18th century, some plants were replanted, of course, but nothing really changed in the garden, apart from those 2 benches, you see one of them, along the axis, which were the 2 closer bosques from the Grand Parterre, where were placed some bancs en exèdre. And that's the evolution of the garden. That's a plan which is mid-19th century, but after the work Louis-Philippe has been doing, creating the first jardin réservé, which you see the palace on the right, and he grabbed and shared the Le Nôtre design in half to keep a private place in the garden, as far as the garden has been open to the public since the very beginning, thanks to Charles Perrault. This is a very bad plan of the evolution of that jardin réservé, showing the Le Fuel design. As you can see, the pools are still there, but the Le Nôtre design on the east part of the garden was totally transformed and was created here, a ditch sharing the space of the parterre into 2 parts, keeping the Le Nôtre design and then adding a 19th century type of thing, which was formal in the drawing of the paths and everything connected to the house, which is there, actually. so on the main picture there was made by Guillaume, just reversing the Lefel propos into the art of Carousel. That's the Guillaume plan with symmetrizing the two, the Le Fuel garden, which was the Jardin Réservé, into the Cour du Carousel, where the palace has disappeared. Sorry. And that's how we found the place. An aerial view. You see the pyramid being built and the work going on in the Cour du Carousel with the Arc de Triomphe made by Percier-Fontaine during Napoleon I's time to be a gate to the palace, which is just in the middle